Chapter 4 Red and Blue. Damon reached up to scratch his shoulder, fingers tracing over the battle marks hidden underneath the layers. A permanent reminder from a fiery arrow which had made it a pain to swing his sword for ages. The blood and tears and infection had healed in time, leaving only rough scars. The dreary little shithole he'd located reeked of fish, sweat and seaweed and rotting wood, but most poignant was the brine. Though it had a few geographical similarities, something about it brought forth memories of the step zones as well. Gods, the fucking crabs. He'd first heard the dragon rumors back in Pentos. A ship journeying from Laraf Bay to Bravos and then to Pentos were the first to talk of dragons in northern Essos, but they hadn't been the last. Because of the distance, the rumors were slow to reach his ears, but a swift exit and with Caraxes' assistance, Damon had regained his contender's head start. Nothing could outpace a dragon. From the clouds, Damon had an overview that outclassed everyone. The wind under Caraxes' wings carried him faster than any ship could dream to move at sea, and any horse could hope to on land. At last, Damon had tracked the dragon rumors to a dingy little fishing town so insignificant not a single map had bothered to mark it, only to arrive one fucking day too late. The night before a Magister of Laraf had attempted to seize the dragon, to his folly. They'd hoped to kill the dragon handlers and steal the dragon while it was chained down for the night. Unfortunately for them, the dragon had been unchained and the handlers ready for the attack. So all the Magister had achieved was sending the dragon fleeing, losing both his soldiers and a son in the process. There were a few survivors from the fire who graciously took the time to answer Damon's questions. At least once he started feeding one after the other to Caraxes. They spoke tales of a winged beast with blue fire and magic that froze limbs. Damon wasn't sure what to make of it, and found the townsfolk's tales more informative. They lived in a hut up in the forest, your grace, and the dragon was much smaller than yours. The town leader was the governor, a kneeling, terrified man sweating through his layers, hoping subservient capitulation would spare his life from Caraxes. The man would be wiser to fear Damon's displeasure than his dragons. Caraxes had been sated on Larafi's soldiers, while Damon remained in a foul mood, and he'd heard a time or two he had a reputation for impetuousness. A day. He'd been beaten to the punch by a fucking day. Who are they? Foreigners, your grace. We don't know when they came here. The bastardized Valyrian rolled hard off the governor's tongue, sharp and unpleasant compared to the melodious Pentoshi accent of Valyrian he'd become familiarized with. Last year, after the night of the falling lights, we went searching for a fallen star but found our hut in the forest instead. Hagrid is the biggest man I ever saw, easily twice as tall as any man, and monstrously strong. There's another as well, a young girl named Hariel. Neither spoke our language, though the girl was learning. Yet you had no issue with these strangers keeping a dragon in the forest. We didn't know about the dragon at first, and afterwards, nothing happened. The two were able to keep it controlled, but... He swallowed hesitantly. Damon sighed, impatient to get out of his shithole of a town. Speak and be done with it. The girl's wrong. Wrong how? Alaquid? Hideous? No, but looks may be deceiving. She's a witch, your grace. Damon blinked. Witch? I can prove it, your grace. Pale and nervous, the governor brought forth a scruffy lantern with a blue glowing fire burning inside it, quickly placing it on the table as if afraid to touch it. How curious. It belonged to the witch. It keeps burning without wick or wax. It's not right, your grace. The lantern itself was unremarkable, dirty with grime, rust and bloodstains which Damon wiped from his fingers. But the flame was captivating. A hovering ball of blue fire with a pleasant warmth, yet not too hot. Damon could reach into the heart of the fire without being burned. Anyone could. Like Caraxes' breath, it tickled his fingers, wrapping around his skin like a heated fog. A harmless flame. Finally something worth his attention. And while the governor beheld the light with spooked trepidation, Damon threw back his head and laughed. It was 2 days later and Damon still hadn't located them. In that time, he'd spotted another ship from Laraf sailing along the coast, and when he'd flown inland, Damon caught sight of a company journeying from Norvos. The race was on. Who would find the dragon first? It had been years since he travelled with Caraxes this way, going from town to town, chasing rumours and whispers. At the start of their marriage, Damon had explored Essos with his wife, travelling north on Dragonback from Volantis, up the river rowing to Qohor and Norvos. They returned to Pentos when Lena learned she was with child, and neither had travelled much since the birth of their twin daughters, Bela and Reyna. Not until now, and the longer Damon was on this adventure, the harder it was to deny how much he'd missed this. Craved it. It wasn't the flying itself, not the travelling or physical exertion. No, it was to finally have a purpose again, a worthy goal to achieve. If the rumors proved true, these upstarts would sooner or later pose a threat to his family. It made the memories of warring in the Stepstones resurface. Where are you, little crab? Which hole have you crawled into? Which stone has been left unturned? Gods, but he missed it. Sometimes it felt like Damon had fought his entire life, yet he'd never been tested against another dragon rider. Though the afternoon was waning, and Damon would probably land soon to give Caraxes some rest. Gripping the reins and leaning left in his saddle, Damon reached for the spiritual spark connecting him to Caraxes. It wasn't a communication of words or visions, but a little nudge, a mental prod which hinted to Caraxes that Damon desired to change course, to steer left. His dragon understood and yet chose to ignore it, stubbornly keeping on course. Damon narrowed his eyes, poking harder. Come now, my Caraxes. With an annoyed shake of his head, Caraxes snorted petulantly and relented at Damon's request. For now. Navigating a dragon was nothing like steering a horse. No rider could ever truly force a dragon to do their bidding, and Caraxes was a particularly ferocious one of his kind. Challenging the will of such a dragon wasn't for the weak of mind, and even after bonding with Caraxes, it was a matter of partnership, not servitude. Caraxes flew where Damon wanted because they cooperated, but it could just as easily go the other way around too. Caraxes' whims of whom to burn and where to fly had oftentimes swayed Damon's desires. As such, it wasn't unheard of for his restless dragon to fly off course with his rider to explore for a day or two, just for the hell of it. To date, Damon's favorite detour had been when he meant to fly to Tyrosh, but Caraxes wanted to visit Lys instead. Though initially embarrassingly pissed off at his lack of control of Caraxes, it turned out the pillow houses of Lys had been the remedy Damon required after being forced to marry Ray Royce. May his bronze bitch burn in the seven hells, hopefully in dragonfire. With dragons, relenting some control was imperative to achieve a good partnership. To not be unquestionably obeyed had always unnerved his brother Viserys, but Damon had learned to revere it. Cherished the challenge as a part of the thrill of being deemed worthy of a dragon. Case in point, it seemed Caraxes was in a mood that day and obstinately shifted course, suddenly steering back towards the hillsides instead of landing. Caraxes! Damon's biting tone would have sent a servant to their knees, falling over themselves to please their prince, but his dragon just snorted derisively. Damon sighed, pinching the bridge of his cold nose. When they landed, Damon would rather be somewhere with a river instead of some barren mountaintop. He needed to refill his water skins and clean up, but Caraxes had other inclinations. They soared further away from the rich green valleys of trickling rivers and deeper into the treacherous parts of the hills of Norvos. It was there, as Damon passed the time coming up with a believable explanation for how he ended up in the forests of Qohor instead of searching for the dragon, without letting on that Caraxes had kidnapped him again, that he finally saw it. A creature flew out from behind a distant mountainside, so far away that it was hard to make out, yet normally it should have been impossible to see at all, because either that was a monstrously large bird or a young dragon. Oh, Caraxes, Damon breathed, excitement boiling in his blood and affection welling in his chest. Marvelous, my worm. Caraxes took off with no disagreements. They may not always agree on where to travel, but when it mattered, they became one heart and one mind. Caraxes' fire and Damon's blood. The brief chase through the sky ended when the other dragon swooped down, seeking refuge on the ground. Caraxes landed with a harsh thud at the foot of the mountain. The other dragon was placed a little higher on the slope, having flown straight back to its handlers. It didn't take more than a glance before Damon understood why the fishers had feared the man called Hagrid, and could reluctantly see why they'd worried to attack. Hairy and massive in both height and width, Damon could only marvel at the sight of his first giant. There was no other explanation for Hagrid's size other than true giant's blood flowing through his veins. The tales Damon had come across claimed his kind would only be found north of the Wall, not in Essos. At most no further south than the wastelands of the north, where the blood of the first men ran thick within the Starks, Boltons and Glovers. The Umbers could model the giant depicted on their house sigil after this man. Hagrid was shouting after a yowling dog fleeing for its life. His booming voice carried easily up to Caraxes' back, though the language itself was nonsensical to Damon's ears. From there, things quickly escalated into a loud ruckus. The other dragon was young, no more than the size of a horse, skinny, with gleaming blue scales, bronze spikes, and an attitude much too large for its size. It screeched fucking murder at Caraxes, with its spiked tail whipping wildly from side to side. Caraxes roared back, but it only served to make the young one screech even louder. Sparks and smoke flared from its snout as it stood up on its hind legs, flapping its wings. A spirited little thing, Damon thought, trying to intimidate Caraxes when even at full wingspan it stretched shorter than Caraxes' tail. Damon calmed himself down so his dragon would pick up on his emotional cues, hopefully reminding Caraxes the blue youngling was just a babe, not a true threat. If possible, Damon wanted it alive. But Caraxes raised a wing, almost unbalancing Damon from his back when he reached out and swatted the little dragon over the head. Damon believed Hagrid might have been grazed by the end of Caraxes' wing, yet he barely stumbled. In the meanwhile, the young dragon toppled over, but swiftly jumped back on its feet, letting out an indignant cry. It charged forwards, chest puffing out the way Damon recognized whenever they cast fire. When the last person in the odd group made herself seen, completely ignorable until the child ran straight in front of the dragon. Fool! It was suicide! Though Damon would much rather the girl be bathed in dragon fire than Caraxes. A strange sound carried on the wind, a hoarse hiss or a strange whisper. Was she hushing it? Inexplicably it worked though. The little dragon let out a stream of rippling hot air without fire, its noises turning from growls and roars to low keen hissing. Damon's brows climbed up to his forehead. Alright. Intriguing. Was this little girl Hariel the witch? Damon glanced over to Hagrid, who was staring wide-eyed and open-mouthed at Caraxes. Who are you? The girl called out in heavily accented Valyrian. What you want? We no want blood? I don't necessarily require your blood either, Damon agreed, unsheathing his Valyrian steel sword from his hip. Only your dragon. The black-haired girl glanced worriedly between the dragons, pale and tight-lipped. Hagrid spoke up and the girl answered in its same strange tongue. What language was that? The open, round and rolling vowels reminded him slightly of common tongue, yet he didn't understand the words. Meanwhile, the young blue dragon was getting stressed and agitated. The only times its attention wasn't fixed on Caraxes was when its yellow eyes flickered towards the girl. It was bonded to the girl? Maybe? Perhaps not. But even if it wasn't a complete bond, it wouldn't be long before it was, and Damon could use that to his advantage. Shepherding an unbound dragon from the hills of Norvos all the way to Pentos would be nothing short of a tedious nightmare. The blue dragon was tiny compared to Caraxes, but still the size of a horse, and Damon couldn't simply stuff it in a box and ship it back to the mansion. It'd probably take months to herd the dragon back, and Lena'd be slow to forgive Damon for missing the birth of their child. But the girl could work. Damon considered the possibilities. The straightforward approach would be to kill Hagrid and tie Hariel to Caraxes' saddle. It wasn't foolproof, but the young dragon would most likely follow them back to Pentos then. After all, home was where the heart is, and the moment the young dragon felt threatened, it had flown straight here. Once they were back in Pentos, Damon could figure out what to do with the girl. Perhaps he'd kill the child. Reyna didn't have a dragon, and this one would be an excellent partner. Spirited and unique. A dragon worthy of his second-born. "This dragon is not yours," Ariel said, her shaking voice contrasting the obstinate expression on her face. "And you have dragon. A big dragon." Her eyes were noteworthy, a piercing color of either blue or green. It was hard to tell which from such a distance, but just then Damon noticed it all said something. "No one can own a dragon, little girl," Damon replied smoothly, rubbing Caraxes' scales. "Only claim their loyalty. Where did you steal that egg from? How did you hatch it?" "We no steal egg. It was given to Hagrid, and we hatch it in our home." "Given? He looks like no Targaryen prince to me, and you somehow hatched it in your home? You mean that decrepit hut in the woods? You expect me to believe such events could have transpired without everything burning down? Why don't Hagrid speak for himself?" Damon spat, glancing annoyed at the giant. He was leaning sideways, head tilted far to the right to get a look of Caraxes' tail. "Hagrid no understand you," Ariel shouted, and then pointed a stick at him. "But I do." Damon burst out laughing. "A stick? You do see my dragon, don't you? Are you Northern? Do you believe the old gods will grant protection from dragon fire through your little branch?" He pointed Dark Sister right back at her, showing what a true weapon looked like. "Bend the knee if you value your life, girl. See reason and yield. Or do you two feel brave with your little stick and little dragon?" "Do you?" Ariel answered. "Hiding behind your dragon?" "Mind your tongue, vagrant, or I'll remove it," he warned her, his temper flaring, since there she stood boldly in front of her dragon, obstinate and challenging whilst making Damon, tucked safely astride Caraxes' back, look a craven. "Expelliarmus!" "Fuck!" Damon gasped outraged as Dark Sister was wrenched out of his hand by an invisible force. It went flying through the air, spinning wildly right towards Ariel. The girl threw herself sideways, the flying sword landing with a thud tip first right into the spot she'd been standing a second before. Damon had no idea what happened, how she did that, but the burst of emotion bled through to his dragon. Caraxes growled angrily, rearing quickly forwards. The blue dragon shrieked even as the three of them scrambled backwards. Ariel had grabbed Dark Sister just as Caraxes lunged, and Damon was sure his dragon was about to swallow her whole, along with Dark Sister, his precious Valyrian steel sword, when suddenly that strange hoarse sound from before called anew. This time he saw it came from Ariel, but she was making sounds Damon wouldn't believe humanly possible without seeing it for himself. It was a slithering thing, too loud and clear to seem right. Whatever it was had a large effect on his dragon though. Caraxes shook his head, snarling and baring his teeth, upset and confused by the strange hissing. What was this? How had she... What was she? "Calm, Caraxes!" Damon called as his dragon was jostling him badly in the saddle. "Calm!" Caraxes shifted around, back coiling and tail whipping harshly in agitation. He obviously wasn't happy, but for once Damon wasn't sure if it was because his dragon was angry or confused. "Calm!" Damon focused fiercely on Caraxes with all his might. His dragon whined but finally began to listen. "Good," Damon said softly. "Good worm." Sneering, Damon cast a look towards Hagrid, expecting fear, but the giant was still staring at Caraxes with an expression no one could mistake for terror. It was more akin to wonder. Wrestling for control of his anger, Damon addressed the little thief. "Unhand my sword at once. The likes of you are not worthy of touching an heirloom of House Targaryen." The girl blinked. You speak of this?" She held up Dark Sister, too heavy and awkward in her small hand. "Is that what sword mean?" "Sword," Damon corrected. That is mine, thief. Leave us be and you can have the sword back. You are one command away from being burned alive. The girl arched a brow, lips pursing as she lifted her chin. You burn us, you will burn the sword in fire too. Damon inhaled deeply, too many impressions combating for dominance. The part of him that was livid with the full rage of Caraxes being battered against a wave of confused curiosity. Or was it Caraxes' emotions? Is this what that hissing had done to his dragon before? To come across something unexplainably different, yet unmistakably magical. Maybe they hadn't stolen the egg. Maybe they had truly hatched it all on their own. Damon couldn't say if that was a good thing or not. One thing was for sure though. Damon needed to change tactics. Needed to learn more. Stubbornly, Damon let go of the reins and climbed down from Caraxes. Gravel rolled under his boots as Damon came to stand next to his dragon and locked eyes with Hariel. Amethysts meeting emeralds. How curious. They appeared unexpectedly well groomed for two people who'd been fleeing for 3 days. Though their clothes were nondescript and their hair wasn't properly styled for fine company, Damon didn't miss the peculiar inaccuracies. They're days away from settlements and many miles away from a river, yet neither the girl or the giant smelled. No sweat from walking for days, no dried mud, stink or stale food or smoky dragon odor. Even in the middle of nowhere, they prioritized cleaning their teeth, wash up, and the girl had brushed her hair. During their travels, even Lena struggled to keep up this amount of grooming whilst traversing the wild. And they'd had dragons to fly them to the nearest keep to clean up. Of the 3 of them, Damon was the worst off. How was that possible? The tense silence didn't bother him much, but what did was Hagrid's distraction. Despite gracing them with his approach, the giant just kept staring at Caraxes, and Damon didn't think he'd felt this overlooked since the last time he'd attended court. Always a prince, never the king. Hagrid? Hariel tugged at his arm, and yet he barely glanced away from the red dragon. Even though Damon heard Hariel's response, he couldn't understand it, but Hagrid finally tore his eyes away from Caraxes. Let's try this again, since I've realized you two have no idea what's happening. Perhaps it's a language barrier, or perhaps you're just idiots. I am Prince Damon of House Targaryen. Return my sword at once, and I will be merciful. There was no visible reaction, and the girl turned to translate his words to Hagrid. A string of sounds impossible to place, except the ending. Demon Targaryen. Targaryen, Damon corrected. Huh? You said the wrong name. I am Damon of House Targaryen. She blinked. Targaryen? No, Damon Targaryen. Demon Targaryen? Hagrid tried. How do you not know my house? It's not a fucking fruit, Damon spat. Targaryen. Demon Targaryen? Ariel said uncertainly. Daemon Targaryen. She nodded. Daemon Targaryen. It's not Close enough. Damon sighed. Trying to remind himself pronunciation was hardly the most pressing issue. He held out his hand, palm up. Hand over my sword. Ariel swallowed. No. Damon was trying so fucking hard to not kill them and be done with it. But they weren't making things easy. No? He said dangerously. Why do you do this? Hariel asked, seeming just as frustrated. We did no wrong. We harmed no one. I will give your sword back, but you let us be. We will go and we will not bother anyone. You foolish child. You believe it'll be that simple. Do you realize your situation? Do you understand how many people are after you? Damon waited and beat for a response, but all she managed to do was stutter. Do you believe it coincidental you've been tracked down twice in less than a week? Do you think I will be the last? While searching for you, I saw ships scouring the coast for your dragon. I saw armies marching from Norvos. You will be hunted until your dragon is taken or dead. What? She looked horrified and genuinely confused. It reminded Damon abruptly of her youth. She really was a child. So much power in the hands of a naive novice. Why? 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 Because you have a fucking dragon! You have a dragon! Which is how I know what's in store for you. If they could, they'd steal my dragon too. Damon spoke frankly and more honestly than he had expected. But they can't. Nothing can stand against the power of the Targaryen dynasty and our dragons. You have more dragons too. Yes. You are a... Ariel struggled to find the right words, slipping briefly into her foreign tongue when she failed, and then had to try again. You are you are... like us? Damon didn't understand. No, he was neither a giant or a girl. Frustrated, Ariel mumbled something under her breath, and Damon took a cautious step back when she made a rock rise into the air. Like this? She said, and then nodded towards the blue dragon, as if these things were linked. Damon stared at the hovering rock, his heart thrumming and a rushing in his ears. She made it look so easy. Yes. Because how could this not be the magic of old Valyria come again? Regardless of her black hair and green eyes, Ariel's blood must surely run through with the power of their people. With the exception of House Targaryen, the few dragon lords that escaped the doom had scattered around Essos, their names dying out during the Century of Blood and the 200 years since the fall of the Valyrian freehold. As surely as Hagrid had giant's blood, this girl had the blood of old Valyria. Where did they come from? What language was that? Damon gazed at the floating stone longingly. How did she do it? Could she teach him that? I have traveled across the continent in search of you, following words of mouth and tales, and I am not alone, Damon said, impressing upon her the seriousness of their situation. I did so to prevent your dragon from being stolen by those seeking to weaponize or kill it. The attack on your home was only the first taste of what awaits in your future. I also come because I thought the dragon was in the hands of clueless amateurs, witlessly endangering yourself and others. He eyed them speculatively, not sure he had been mistaken there. They had magic, but did they know how to rear a dragon? Truly? What I've observed today has made me reconsider though, he admitted. Here is my final offer. Return my sword and join me. My house has reared dragons since we were dragon lords of the Valyrian freeholds, and with us you and your dragon will thrive. Mark my words, you will find no better allies, nor any worse enemies. The girl moistened her lips, glancing uncertainly between Damon, the two dragons, and Hagrid. Please be patient. I have to tell Hagrid what you offer, she asked uncertainly. Damon nodded and clasped his hands behind his back to show he was at rest. The blue dragon had retreated during their conversation, watchful but calmer. It was truly unique, though most of it was in the details. It'd be easier if you could see her side by side with another young dragon such as Moondancer. Damon still suspected the dragon's brows were too pronounced for its age and the chest broader. Its claws, horns and spikes had matured quickly too, as that was something that usually only hardened when they were older. The cluster of spikes around the tip of her tail was of particular interest. Every time it hit the ground, the tail tore up gravel, moss and earth with the efficiency of a spiked flail. At last, Ariel turned away from Hagrid. Join you? What do you mean? Join me back to Pentos. My family lives there and we have dragons. Yours will fit right in with us. "One of my daughters has a young dragon too, and she is much of an age with you," Damon said. Bela and Reyna were a bit younger at 8 years old, but surely that was close enough. How old was Hariel? 1 and 10? It wouldn't be an issue. At heart, all girls liked the same things, didn't they? "Where is Pentos?" Damon arched a brow. Pentos is a port city along the western coastline of Essos. "How long does it take to get there?" "On foot? Months," Damon said, and reached to pet Caraxes. "But on dragonback? Significantly shorter." Hariel gaped. You mean to..." She flapped her arms up and down, mimicking the actions of the word that evaded her. Damon's lips twitched up at the corners at her shameless lack of decorum. "Fly? Yes." It took some more coaxing to convince them. At the very least, he got his sword dog sister back, and safely sheathed in its scabbard, a hand resting over the hilt, just in case. Though there was a bit to go before he won them over. In the end, the key didn't lie in the girl at all. Mentioning that they'd meet a dragon even larger than Caraxes swayed Hagrid, though in hindsight, Damon wondered why he hadn't seen that coming. But once he'd won the giant on his side, he got the girl too. After that, it was just pleasantries left. Oh, if the king could see him now. Yet Viserys still thought Damon incapable of diplomacy, his misled, weak older brother. The fool knew nothing. With that out of the way, allow me to formally introduce my dragon. This is Caraxes, the Bloodworm. And what's the name of yours? He is Norbert, Hariel said. Surely you jest. Damon was not in the mood for children's games. What is the dragon's true name? It is, Hariel insisted. His name is Norbert. You managed to hatch a dragon, Damon said slowly, some of the respect he'd earned over their meeting cooling significantly, and could think of nothing more suitable or fitting of her station than Norbert. Does that name mean something special in your tongue? Because in mine it sounds like a northern butcher's boy. Hariel shifted uncomfortably. Hagrid gave him his name. You don't say, Damon drawled, suspecting Hagrid's lack of understanding went deeper than the language barrier. It was altogether sacrilegious. The dragon lords of old Valyria must be rolling in their ashen graves. He glared from Hagrid to Hariel, shaking his head. Though for your information, your dragon is not a he. Norbert, Damon shuddered just saying the name, is a female.